restricted operation, and retransmitting radio signals. In the first question here, and a lot of these things are just kind of definitional. In the first question here, what's the maximum height above ground to which an antenna structure may be erected without requiring notification to the FAA and registration with the FCC?
Milt?
Yeah, it's not advancing.
I'm sorry. I had the mouse and I made a mistake. Let's just start that section over again, please.
Okay, we can do that, sure. Okay, what's the maximum height above ground to which an antenna structure may be erected without requiring notification to the FAA and registration with the FCC, provided you're not near a public airport? Now, if you're near a public airport, then the restrictions are greater, naturally. But unless you're, if you're not near a public airport, then 200 feet is the highest you can go without making these notifications. And I'm still not advancing. There we go. Okay, 200 feet. Okay, which of the following conditions must beacon stations comply? A beacon station is one that is used, it's an automatic station that transmits a signal on a particular band, and these are published on the internet. And you can listen for stations to find out if there's a good signal path between you and some other place where one of these beacons is located. That's what the beacon is for. There are some conditions with which a beacon station must comply, and one of them is that you can have no more than one beacon signal on the same band from a single location. So I could have from my house, I could have a beacon that transmitted on the 10-meter band, the 15-meter band, the 20-meter band, but I could not have two beacons that transmitted on the 20-meter band. That is what this is saying. And D is the correct answer there. No more than one beacon signal in the same band from a single location. Which of the following is a purpose of a beacon station as identified in the FCC rules? It's observation of propagation and reception. It's to let you know what's going on with propagation of radio signals in the ionosphere. Which of the following must be true before amateur stations may provide communications to broadcasters for dissemination to the public? This is an area that is hardly ever met. In this case, the communications must be directly relate to the immediate safety of human life or protection of property. There must be no other means of communication. So what we're talking about here is using amateur radio to provide communications to a broadcast station for transmission to the public, and it's never legal except under these conditions. Must relate directly to immediate safety of human life or protection of property. Must be no other means of communication reasonably available before at the time of the event. Now, this immediate safety of human life or protection of property is an important phrase to remember because that's the FCC's definition of an emergency. Immediate safety of human life or protection of property is the FCC definition of emergency. When may music be transmitted by an amateur station? The general rule is you can't, but the specific rule that we're looking at here is when it's an incidental part of a manned spacecraft retransmission. So for some reason or other, they've made that exception when you're talking to the International Space Station or to some other manned spacecraft. And I don't know the specific reason. I just know that that's the only time that music may be transmitted by an amateur station. And that includes music in the background while you're operating. You should assure that if someone's playing music in your house that it can't be transmitted out over your microphone from the background. When is an amateur station permitted to transmit secret codes? The only time is to control a space station. And the only reason they're kept secret there is so that other people who are not authorized to control that station are not able to do it. So in general, we are not permitted to transmit secret codes or anything that obscures the meaning of a transmission except to control a space station. What are the restrictions on the use of abbreviations or procedural signals within the amateur service? They may be used if they do not obscure the meaning of a message. You can use Q codes, you can use 10 codes, you can use other commonly known codes as long as they're not used to obscure the meaning of the message. When choosing a transmitting frequency, what should you do to comply with good amateur practice? In this case, let's see if I remember correctly. Yeah, all of these choices are correct. You reviewed the Part 97 rules regarding permitted frequencies and emissions, the chart that we were looking at in the first group there. Follow the band plans agreed to by the amateur radio community, and we'll talk a bit about band plans later on. Before transmitting, listen to avoid interfering with ongoing communications. All of these choices are correct. And common practice is if you're on the high frequency bands especially, is to ask if frequencies in use before you begin operating there. Before you call CQ trying to establish a contact, ask a couple of times if the frequency is in use and identify your station. When may an amateur station transmit communications in which the licensee or control operator has a pecuniary or monetary interest? The only time is when other amateurs are being notified of the sale of apparatus normally used in an amateur station, and such activity is not done on a regular basis. So what that means is, if I have a transmitter that I want to sell, I can talk to you about it on the radio, unless I'm a guy who owns an amateur radio equipment store, and then I can't do it. So as long as I don't do it on a regular basis, I can do that, and as long as it's apparatus that's used in an amateur station. Now, can I get on and tell you that I have a car for sale and describe it to you and all of that? According to this rule, I can't do that. But I can do it if it's a sale of apparatus normally used in an amateur station. What's the power limit for beacon stations? The beacons are limited to 100 watts peak envelope power output. And there's a beacon station on Laie that I visited. That's the only one I've actually, in Laie on Oahu, that I've visited. And that's the only one that I've actually seen. And what it does, it transmits an identifier on 100 watts, then it does 10 watts, then 1 watt, and then 1/10 of a watt, and then it changes to another band and does that again. 100 watts, 10 watts, 1 watt, 1/10 of a watt, and so on. But the power limit for a beacon station is 100 watts. How does the FCC require an amateur station to be operated in all respects not specifically covered by Part 97 rules? It's in conformance with good engineering and good amateur practice. So this is the general rule here for anything that isn't specifically covered in the Part 97 rules, in conformance with good engineering practice. Who or what determines good engineering and good amateur practice? And as you can probably guess, it's the FCC. Okay, so that is the B group of questions in the G1 subelement. You will have one of those 12 questions on your test, and we can pause here and see if there are any questions from the class.